Hello, everybody. Nick here. Before we get started with the podcast episode, I would like to apologize in advance. There were some technicality issues with the recording, and Kevin has a bit of a robot voice. This will not be an issue with further episodes, as we have figured out a way around this, but in the meantime, please enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Mana Dorks Podcast. I'm your host, Nick, with my co-host, Kevin.
Howdy, howdy.
Hello, hello. How have you been, sir?
Not too shabby.
Yeah? Had an exciting week with the Foundations release and everything?
Yeah, we had a pretty decent pre-release the past, a week ago.
Yeah? How many in attendance?
I mean, it was lower by far than the Dustmorn or Bloomborough, but it was still fine. They all fired at least. That's the best we can hope for.
What kind of reception from players did you get?
People are liking this set. I mean, the mechanics are pretty straightforward. Seems to be a lot of like reprints people wanted for Commander, a lot of cards for Commander. So it's been selling well, and then people have really loved the Weeb cards. Weeb cards always seem to drive the pack sales.
Did anyone get any hits at the store, like any Land of War Elves or anything?
Yes. What was I'm trying to think of the white. There was a white card that was opened. I can't remember. I don't know. I'm usually not front opening packs with customers like Zach is, so I'd have to ask him to see what was opened. But I didn't. I mean, most of that stuff comes from collectors, and I don't touch collectors, so.
Oh, yeah. You know, the collector's boosters, this is the first time I've bought collector boosters ever, and I bought 2 of them just because I wanted to roll the dice and see what I got. I didn't get anything, like nothing of any value. I was really hoping I'd get one of those cool, like, anime style foils that they have. Like, those, what do they call, like, prismatic foils or whatever? They're really neat.
So the 2 chase things are and then they have the mana symbol. What do they call those ones? I'm sure.
Yeah. Those mana symbol ones look really neat. With that indented kind of effect on them.
They had, let's see, borderless foils, extended showcase foils. Yeah, I'm so out of it with what the chase cards are called these days, but everyone is a little bit disappointed they didn't have any sort of serialized, but there was definitely enough value in the specialty versions, and they seem to be decently rare, which is driving them, so.
Yeah. Actually, I got more luck opening because I've been getting back into Pokemon the past few weeks here, and I bought a box of Surging Sparks, and I managed to get one of the Pikachu hits, not the $500 one, but I got the $100 gold one. And I was comparing with a friend because I was like, damn, I'm making way more money doing this than I would, opening Magic. And then he explained to me, he said, no, you just got really lucky, really lucky. Yeah. I'm like, oh.
Pokemon's awful. So Pokemon, the expected value out of any pack is horrible. It's by far the worst out of any TCG. And that's, I keep saying that Pokemon is being propped up by degenerate gamblers. So,
all those pack opening whatnot streams and whatever.
Oh yeah. Like people love the thrill. So it's what really started this last wave is everyone's really crediting there's a guy that went viral on TikTok and on YouTube, but did a series called "Should I Open It or Keep It Sealed?" And it just led to a mad rush of everyone like, I want to do this. I want to, and so.
I think I know what you're talking about. Like the videos are all like kind of like high quality production kind of.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I know what you're talking about.
And short. And I mean, it's exactly what TikTok and YouTube Shorts was looking for, and it just hit perfect with a good old algorithm and people watching them. And yeah, so now there's a lot of knockoffs and a lot of there's the whole Pokemon market. I mean, I could talk for hours about this and tick a lot of people off again because I've had a war against Pokemon, I guess. A lot of my videos on my channel have just been me face palming at the hysteria that the Pokemon market's having right now.
Yeah, that's it's actually something I've been wanting to dip my toes into a little bit, not to invest or anything, but just, get a better understanding of what's going on with it because like the millions of other people across the world right now, I got pulled back into Pokemon with that new booster pack opening app. Like, I think there's a play functionality, but it's mostly just a booster simulator app. And
oh, you're not even talking about the TCC simulator. That's another thing that people are crediting.
oh, yeah, no, not that. I mean, I'm playing a lot of that too on Steam. I've gotten at least 40, 50 hours in that game. That's a lot of fun. I mean, like, running a real store ain't going to be anything like in that game for sure.
Yeah. Well, they say it's giving people like very unrealistic expectations because don't you like crack packs to make money in that game?
Pretty much. So how it works, well, I mean, it's kind of one of those bare bones early release games right now. And how it works is you can either make money by selling product directly to consumers, and you buy it from a quote unquote distributor, and you have to pay for the licenses for the product and all this random stuff. But you get XP based off of how many transactions you have. So what a lot of people do is you can min-max it two ways. You can either min-max your profits by cracking open packs a lot, which will slowly get you levels, but then you just sell the singles. Like, that's kind of like pretty much your primary way to make money. Or if you want to grind and get a lot of XP, you sell a lot of individual booster packs. And obviously it's not like real life. Like, you'll have random customers come in and they'll buy like 70 booster packs, and then you get X amount of XP or whatever, and then you just do the loop over and over again. It's very addicting. Very, very addicting.
Well, for anyone out there, you can come play real TCC Simulator and work for free for me. I'll let you sell Pokemon packs all day long.
You could do one of those consignment things, like sell somebody's singles and then take a 10% off the top or something like that.
Yeah. That's the one thing about only a game store is there's never any work. Like, if you want to find work, there's work. I'm so backed on sorting cards, on organizing the store, on inventory, on like there's always endless things you can do. So I've learned over the years just to do the smart things instead of trying to burn myself out. Just make sure that all the things that need to be done are done.
Right.
And then if I decide to have any free time, then I can look into little things like arbitrage and sorting, and how I can squeeze a few bucks out of this and that. But
I mean, that's already so time consuming itself, especially because I've sorted my own collection as like a hobby, and wow, it's just an insane amount of time to actually go through cards.
I think that's like one of the main things I've learned over the years is how to prioritize my time on, the things that actually make money. And then, the things that theoretically can make money. Those are the things that's like, okay, if it's worth my time, I'll go into it. But yeah.
A lot of it is just that fishing to determine if it's even worth it in the first place or not. All right. Well,
yep.
On our docket today, we don't really have too many subjects. We want to kind of keep the episode a little bit short. What we want to discuss is we want to briefly talk about a new lawsuit that is involving some investors with Hasbro directly in regards to the printing fiasco from 2022 and 2023. We're going to talk a little bit about foundations and our first impressions. And then finally, to cap it off, we are going to have a Commander versus normal constructed discussion and see, almost the state of the union of the formats, kind of as it were, because it seems like as of lately, there's been more of a shift in the mentality to go back towards constructed. So we're going to discuss that a little bit later. But first off, we want to talk about this Hasbro lawsuit that's going on. And so with this link that I probably post a screenshot on the podcast, comes from Polygon. We'll briefly talk about it here. So the first part is a self-described investor rights law firm filed a lawsuit Wednesday alleging that Hasbro, the gaming and toy company, misrepresented its excessive inventory to investors, something the firm says is a violation of federal securities laws. So with that first sentence right out of the bat, it is a bit vague, but if you had to glean any information off of it and whether or not it actually has any merit, do you think it actually does, Kevin?
Well, again, there's a fine line in between what shareholders and investors are privy to and what the company has to disclose and what they don't have to disclose. And this lawsuit it comes down to like people feel like they weren't getting the full picture, like that WotC was purposely misrepresenting what was going on. And it's very gray though, because like I said, do they, like, as a company, you're always going to try to pump up your no one's going to go out with doom and gloom and tell their shareholders the sky is falling. I mean, you're always going to try to, turn lemons into lemonade. And so you have to show intent that the company like had to purposely try to mislead people. And that's where I think this lawsuit's a little bit moot. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's no doubt about it that Wizards of the Coast, and this article actually does explain it, kind of the hows and the whys of this happened, that after when the pandemic hit and all the free money hit the market, there was just a run and no company was prepared for the sales that came in. And so then they frantically tried to overcompensate, and it led to, like, Pokemon, for example, building an entire new printer to try to make sure that they never are, caught off guard for when their products are hot. That's why I warn people about Pokemon, is they can ramp up printing at any time to meet demand. And they will, and they should. And same thing, Wizards saw that the opportunity, and they're like, wow, let's just, shoot for the stars. And this lawsuit just alleges that they didn't disclose how much of that inventory was burning or still, burning at the warehouse level. And I don't know if it's talking too much about Magic, because this article states more on the toy sector. But if you do look at what happened in 2022, especially, is I don't even know when the supply is ever going to end from Baldur's Gate. So that's something that I was very surprised the market was able to eat Baldur's Gate up in the last year. There seems to be a insatiable appetite for that set, at least at the price point, the discounted price point that the market has for now, because no one's been able to sell Baldur's Gate for anywhere near this quote unquote MSRP or anywhere near good margins compared to distributor original price. But most distributors have discounted it, and we don't know where the discounts come from. There's a lack of, I don't know exactly how it works with distributors and their relationship with Wizards, whether Wizards tells them to put things on sale and then they can, and gives them like a better restocking rate at that point for that particular product. But yeah, distributors have been blowing out a lot of that 2022 product for a long time now, and the supply just doesn't ever seem to end. And then we also went through the whole Amazon dump era, and the Amazon dump era also kind of reflects this mentality that it's okay, this is Wizard of the Coast desperately trying to get rid of inventory that they overprinted. And as an investor, as someone that's a shareholder, those things probably should be discussed. But I mean, that's why you invest in companies that you have good communication with and trust. So again, it's this fine line between what is legal and what is just like a good communication between investors or illegal, I guess, and what is good communication. So I don't know what will come out of this. So again, the details are very hazy in this article.
Yeah, like as far as details go, so as the rest of the article, because it doesn't really provide a whole lot of information, and obviously this is going to be a lot more backdoors and a lot more sensitive type of discussions between different lawyers. But as far as other information that we can look at here, the article further states that the law firm filed a complaint in a New York court on behalf of the West Palm Beach Firefighters Pension Fund, asking the court to grant the case class action status, which means we can bring other investors in as well. You got one investor that's a bit miffed, well, you can bring in the other 12 or whatever. And the lawsuit alleges that Hasbro purchased inventory to meet that demand, but ended up buying too much, which is exactly what you were talking about. And then they told the investors the high purchasing was necessary to mitigate supply chain risk and meet consumer demand ahead of the 2022 holiday season, which, hindsight being 2020, that was a particularly crazy era for just cards in general, but particularly Magic. It was a very tumultuous kind of period where there was just too much of everything, and the values, because there was too much of everything, the values of everything was just tanking, and you had to deal with Amazon dumps left and right, and that kind of became its own meme for a while. But it concludes here that the lawsuit alleges Hasbro was intentionally misleading investors and knew it overpurchased inventory to an extent that significantly outpaced customer demand, which obviously with Baldur's Gate, you reach a certain point even after the release of Baldur's Gate 3, there's just a plethora of cardboard just sitting, rotting effectively. And do you think that a lot of this is kind of an effect of like that viral video of that landfill that was just full of cards?
Well, the landfill full of cards has kind of been debunked. So I worked in a freight company, so I know exactly how this works. That was probably claimed. There's probably an accident. There's something that happened, and instead of returning the shipments or even seeing what's salvageable, it's easier just to dump it for insurance. And it's ridiculous. Like one of the most disgusting days of my life was one of my first days that I worked for this freight company. And since I wasn't very skilled on the forklift or other things, they had me just doing some of the monotonous, easy jobs, and they had me crushing a bunch of some of this freight that was insurance claimed, and it was all toiletries. So it was like shampoo and so it was for one of one of the hotel chains. It was all the things they replace after every use on the
those little travel size
linens,
kind of stuff.
Yeah,
okay.
All that kind of things, and yeah, like little paper towels and Kleenex type packets and stuff. And before then, I had actually volunteered for a homeless shelter in the Salt Lake area at the time, and I knew the demand. Like that sort of stuff that's exactly what they wanted, was what I was crushing. And I was like, I even asked them, like, can we donate this? Can we do something? It was just so sickening to me that it was being crushed. And they're like, no, because what ends up happening is if we donate it, then this hotel chain comes and like, well, you got some sort of monetary value out of this thing that was, or the insurance company, whoever it is, like, oh, you got some sort of gain out of this that was supposed to be claimed as a loss,
right.
And then they try to sue, and so it's just easier to get rid of it. And I'm certain this is the exact. I'm sure a truck rolled, or there just was like our container was contaminated or something along the lines where it was written off as a loss. And even though they could have salvaged it, it's just easier to at that point destroy it. But it just showed the scope of how much was out there. And that's another product specifically as Modern Horizons 2 that I have no clue. The end, like you'd think that we would be at the point of Modern Horizons 2, arguably, not I'm going to say the second strongest, most desirable set ever, because Modern Horizons 3 outpaced it, is still at distributor cost, is still not making any sort of profit margin in the secondary market, and it sold like crazy here. And everyone else I've talked to, that set was not a low selling set. It was a very high selling set. In fact, it might be one of my, if not the most, and I'm going to put Baldur's in this exact same category, of the sets I've sold the most of in my entire time of selling cardboard. And there still seems to be no end in sight. And yeah, I think a lot of that has to do, like, just the image of that might have led up to this lawsuit. But I don't know. It's a kind of a weird tightrope to walk with companies, because, like, me personally, I think getting paid the big bucks to make big buck decisions, and they absolutely dropped the ball in this because they should have saw it coming, where this was a temporary spike. I don't know why all these companies got the hubris that their games were going to last, this bump was going to last past this free money. And it was obviously to me that it wasn't. And then, the problem I had with Wizards too is they ramped up the FOMO at the same time, where I think that things like Modern Horizons 2 and some of these other sets would have done well and would have sold through their supply if they wouldn't have then, let's go on to this other thing, like Lord of the Rings, they start pushing more and more and more and more and more. And, as I said, up in the FOMO with the One Ring and all these other, chase gamble cards and stuff. And so again, it's this lawsuit's weird to me because I don't know exactly what shareholders are privy to. And then you're going to be defining what Wizards considers okay and what they don't consider okay. Because if they think that they still are fine, if they have that inventory, and if these Amazon dumps or these blowouts at distribution level are just part of business as usual, because you have to take calculated risks. Because I talked about this in one of my videos. I wanted to probably do a full-fledged video on talking about the new print strategy that Wizards has, and I agree with this new one, but I also can't blame them during the 2021 era, because everything you don't print, and if that demand was there, you don't sell it, and you miss out on that sale that would have occurred. And so oftentimes it's better to overprint and then just be like, okay, we'll sell what you can, and then we'll blow out what we don't and make that the profit margin right there. And that way we're going to maximize what we could have made, and not leave any, left that we couldn't have made. But the alternative, I think, is less risky, where I think they're starting to understand that like scarcity itself starts to bring demand, and also leads to better overall purchases in the future that they can always then on their next sets. That's where they can. And I think that this new era of whoever's controlling Wizards of the Coast understands that more. They're doing a lot of things good, like bringing back the MSRP, like limiting collector boosters, like doing one and dones, and being like, I don't understand with this whole their whole mentality of 2021, 2022 of just printing because they're afraid of missing a sale. Where these companies like Wizards of the Coast greatest competitor is not Pokemon. It is not Yu-Gi-Oh! It's their other product that is still out there.
Yeah.
And so you have to let that blow through before you can actually create new products. And at least this new leadership, I think, is understanding that a bit more. And I'm liking their reprint policies. I still think it's a little bit too much, in my opinion. Like, we just had a Lord of the Rings reprint again, and it's through the pipeline that Lost Caverns of Ixalan, Bloomburrow, I want to say one more, maybe Wilds Will Drain, but Lost Caverns of Ixalan and Bloomburrow Commander decks for sure are getting a reprint, and those are the two that actually did well. And it's like, oh man, now you're gonna just like, so now people that could actually feel cool about one purchase are like, oh, I'm glad I got into this earlier, actually bought this when it was cheap. Now they're gonna flood the market with these products while there's still stinker products on the shelves that need a little bit of breathing room so that they can actually be purchased. So I don't know. Like I said,
maybe that slight reprint, it might be in anticipation of something like Foundations, where they expect Standard to at least receive a bump in growth, so they're trying to make sure the supply is there.
Well, no, I think these reprints are actually smart because they know the demand is actually there. And so, like, I've been impressed. This is the third time Lost Covers and Ixalan Commander decks have got a printing, and I was in the market had a Sky is Falling last time it happened. So Commander decks were going. There was a Commander deck by itself that was going for like almost $200, and then
was that the reprint happened. One?
Yeah, yep. And then the reprint happened, and oh man, the market just panicked and dumped, like, a bunch of things just dumped out, and the reprint ended up not being as big as it was, and it got eaten up quickly again. And the people that got in cheap on the dinosaurs, and after the reprint, the people that bought it right before, I remember I think we did sell one for like maximum value right before the reprint to someone. I kind of felt bad, but I mean, that's the name of the game here.
They thought it was fair, so they bought it, whatever.
But then I was kicking myself because then I just blew out the reprint on LCI. I just let like patrons eat it up, and we put it back to super cheap here locally and let people get the Dinosaur and Pirate deck for a lot cheaper this time around, and then go back to order it like 2 weeks later, and it's gone again.
It's just gone again. Yeah.
so that's what's good about like how Wizards of the Coast is trickling these things in is so much better than this era. And so there absolutely is something to be said about this article, because it's there was so much product, but you have to show intent. You have to show that it was like purposely bad business decisions that then they tried to cover up and didn't want. And so this article is like arguing that they were trying to stop people from selling or get more people to invest based upon faulty numbers. And yeah, and the thing is too is now with Hasbro recovering, this might just kind of be a nothing burger, like anyway, because now the stock prices are going to start to eke back up.
That's what I'm thinking, because Magic as a brand and Hasbro has been on the growth for a while, and it's not like it's not like it's inverted down and it's stayed down. Like, that makes more sense if investors want to sue to, maybe light a fire under the company's ass to actually start making money again. But they have been making money, and I can't really recall a period where they were in a dire straits type of situation, at least not in the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, the last quarters were down, which I don't know why that is. Now, investors are so greedy now with stocks. There seems to be no leeway for, uh, bad market turns, or I don't fault companies too. Like this is weird coming from my mouth, because I've been so critical of Wizards doing this, but you have to go for it sometimes. You have to again, I thought that I think that since they were getting paid the big bucks, they should have had some foresight to be like, okay, this is just going to be a temporary bump. Let's ride what we can, sell into it, but don't overprint. Don't kill our. I mean, that was when Bank of America came out a couple of years ago with their assessment of Wizard of the Coast. They were saying that Wizard of the Coast was sacrificing long-term gains for short-term profits, and they kind of called this. So, but still, it's like you really have to. This lawsuit's gonna have to show intent. They're gonna have to show, fraud at this point, and I think that's gonna be very, very tough to prove with it. And when all said and done, too, it's kind of a frivolous lawsuit as far as like these are horrible precedents sometimes when people just get so sue happy.
Yeah.
With.
I mean, heaven forbid they actually get any sort of ground with it, or if they win in any sort of capacity, because then that's just going to change Wizards' strategic direction. They're going to be, at least I would expect them to be, more apprehensive about how they release products that may end up hurting the game in the long run anyways.
And what are they required to disclose? I don't know from a legal standpoint what that is, but why would you want to disclose all your doom and gloom?
Yeah.
Like I said, you make lemonade out of lemons, or try to at least sugarcoat a little things here and there, because especially if you do think you can recover. So why temporarily shoot yourself if it's just going to work itself out anyway? And again, that's where I don't know the whole legal responsibilities that a company has to disclose X, Y, or Z. But what I'm saying here is I think the problem has mainly been corrected with a lot of especially Wizards of the Coast.
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of these claims seemed to have become irrelevant over the course of the last 8-12 months anyways. So, and who knows how long that it's taken for them in court to get this set up to this point anyways. It might have taken the better part of a year to get to this point, but it seems very backwards, especially from an investor's standpoint, where all things considered, things are looking up, and they probably will go up, especially with next year and Marvel and all that kind of stuff. It just, unless Wizards of the Coast has an actual brain worm crawling around in everyone's brains and they all decide to shoot themselves in the foot collectively, I don't see this panning out the way that the investors are trying to paint the picture as.
Well, it kind of doesn't make sense to me. So these people that are invested in Hasbro are now going to create a lawsuit that's going to give bad publicity to shares they own.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I don't know. That's again where I think that stocks have lost their meaning, because when the stocks, it used to be a way for people that believed in a certain product could put their money and make money at the same time. And it seems like everyone is so short-termed that it's like, and again, obviously if they could just make a buck by a lawsuit, they're going to go that route rather than they'll purposely devalue their own stock by having these lawsuits so they can get a payoff in this other.
It's so stupid.
I don't know. It's pretty disgusting, but
at a certain point, one of my more radical, I won't really get into it, but one of my more radical positions is that eventually money is going to lose all of its meaning if people keep acting the way that they do, especially in niche situations like this, where it's just how much more do you want? Exponential growth in terms of profit sounds great. In practice, it's not really a thing, at least not at the rate that these investor types really want it to happen. It's not like we're going to get 2 billion more people in the next decade, and then boom, all of a sudden here's your new market cap. That's just not a thing that's going to happen. Doesn't really make
people
any
want
sense.
unrealistic gains. We used to be so happy with like 7% a year, and now people want 200%.
Exactly. It's so stupid. Well, with that aside, keeping on with the theme of stupid, because I know you're a bit more negative on this than I am, but let's talk a bit about foundations. Now, at least for first impressions, I've opened a few packs. I have gotten a couple of the pre-release kits, at least what I could get, because for those of you who may be more lucky or aren't as lucky, Foundations is a bit of a harder product to get. And I particularly wanted the starter bundle because I wanted one for myself and I wanted to get some more as gifts for other people. But it seems like all on the whole, Foundations has just been a knock out of the park. Everyone is just all on the same page and they all love it. I've gotten to play a little bit of it on Arena. And my first impression is that it seems like we're getting a lot of tools, especially on Arena, to help really accentuate more eternal play. I mean, obviously we're going to have a Pioneer Masters style set coming in Arena anyways, but it feels, at least in some aspects, a step in the right direction, especially when it pertains to stuff like Arena. But for you running the store, what do you think so far about Foundations? Like, what are your first thoughts on it?
Foundations actually hit the sweet spot for the average player. Now, again, this is where I have to step out of Kevin's shoes and just realize that I can't have my nostalgic glory years. They're probably never coming back. I hate Foundations because it brings a bunch of high-powered cards into Standard that don't belong in Standard, in my opinion, and are now going to be plaguing Standard for 5 years. So I have been just begging for a toned-down format, 1v1 format, that isn't turn 3, that isn't just full of hyper-aggression or hyper-control, or even, like, the combos these days are quite boring, too. They're back-breaking, they're easy to assemble, they take no thought, it's a lot of just cheese on that end. And then the control and the aggro, well, first, the last bit of printings are definitely a response to how suffocating control was about a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, if you really think about it, like Nikk Massacre and think of some of the other black cards,
like
Record
Invoke Despair, all that kind of stuff.
Invoke Despair, I think they'd all be fine now in Standard because they are pretty bad against some of the tempo-based strategies, and they're horrible against some of the aggro strategies.
Mm-hmm.
It's being, if you think about a deck that's running like 2 to 3 Nikk Massacres and like a couple even rank, I can think of it. I just said it. The draw card vehicle, and then you have a bunch of 5-drops in your hand too. You have a bunch of hands that just cannot compete with these super aggressive decks. And so I think the pendulum has swung too far the other way now. And my concern is, okay, then are they going to have to then swing it back again to control? And then we just get this massive power creep of where we're having to go down the route of Modern, of having these. So Modern went through this plague of like super uninteractive combo decks that are hard to deal with. It just had so much value, and that's why they had to come up with cards like Fury and Grief and all these free spells that could be these panic buttons. They could punch these combo decks, and then they had to make them good enough to be able to compete against non-combo decks. And so you have this Modern format now that is just ultra high powered with these cards. That everything is a must answer. Everything is just like an uber threat, and that's what happens when you keep going down this route rather than trying to do power resets. And so with Foundations, I was hoping they'd set a foundation for possibly a power reset, put in some staples like the Lana Royale's good. I think that green has been missing. Obviously, green has been a weak color in Constructed for quite some time. You have to pair it in specific ways that doesn't feel green. It feels more like the other color that you're pairing it with. So bringing back Lana Royale helps the green basically cheat a turn to get into their bigger creatures and go over the top of like red and white.
Absolutely.
So I think that was a good addition. But what I can't stand is Bolt Wave. Bolt Wave and Boros Charm were just absolutely just damning the format. That it's going to be a very, very rough like turn 3, turn 4 format. And I don't know why they thought it was a good idea. You basically have modern burn in standard now. And you go back to the formation of modern, you have Lightning Helix, you have Boros Charm, you have Lightning Bolt, you have Lava Spike. And so what you're really missing is Lightning Bolt, and they haven't added that yet into the format. But this Bolt Wave is basically like they hadn't reprinted a Lava Spike ability ever. I mean, it was Lava Spike and Lightning Bolt. So there was Lightning Bolt, and then they tried to make like a more fair Lightning Bolt once they came up with Lava Spike, and they realized, okay, we can't have any more 3 damage for 1 mana. I mean, it'd just be too many, and then it'd just be people playing the entire deck of these cards. And so that's kind of my problem with foundations, specifically those type of cards they threw in. And now it's really ramped up the power level of standard to where, I mean, if you look at the decks right now in standard that are competitive, like the number 1 deck is still a pretty grindy deck, but it has a lot of threats that can, take over the game. With Dimir mid-range, with it just tries to eke out a lot of value with its demons. You have to answer the 6/6 demons, otherwise you're going to die. And if not, though, they're going to gain a lot of tempo and a lot of value based on however you build Dimir mid-range. And what makes Dimir mid-range competitive is it has the best removal package, the only removal package that can really go toe-to-toe with these red decks that just come out swinging. And it was if it was just adding like Bolt Wave and Boros Charm into a format that didn't have very good creatures, that would be maybe one thing because it'd make it more one-dimensional burn. But when you have a format that has a Monastery Swiftspear, arguably the best 1-drop ever printed, and now we have things like Slick Shot Show Off that adds another dimension to where these decks can just win out of nowhere. And it's to me, the power level of standard is way too high. And as far as an introductory format where standard was supposed to be where new players could get their feet wet and then they could move on to these higher powered formats like Pioneer and Modern, and now essentially there's no difference between Pioneer and Standard. Like standard decks are very competitive in Pioneer right now. You can basically take any of the top 5-10 decks in Standard, and they'll either translate perfectly, like the Mirror Midrange has only a few adjustments, the Fatal Push instead of Cut Down, Thought Seize instead of Duress, that sort of thing. There used to be these big steps between the formats. Like Legacy was so much more powerful than Modern, and Modern was so much more powerful than Standard. And then when they introduced Pioneer, it was supposed to put a because that gap got so wide that they had to have a format that was kind of like this intermediate between the two. And now it's like Standard is insanely powerful and Pioneer's slightly more powerful.
Yeah.
So it's just, I don't know. I'm just craving a format where there's a lot more tit for tat, where there's a lot more ability to play mid-range decks and tempo decks. And it just seems that if you're to take Dimir midrange and Golgari midrange out of the equation, you have a really boring standard of autopilot decks, is what I like to call them, that just play themselves. That you're not really a lot of decisions makes. You're slamming the cards. And maybe from her perspective, I guess maybe that's where Wizard of the Coast has done its research. Maybe people just want to play that way. Maybe they feel good. Any person, I mean, that's the whole appeal to poker, is that any person can sit down and beat any person at any given time, because there's not a lot of even if you're an underdog, you're still like a 45 to 55% as far. So the skill, in my opinion, is for Standard right now, is if you take away the Dimir midrange and Golgari midrange kind of mirrors, it's very, very low.
Yeah.
On compared to some of the standards that we've had in the past.
Now with some of the upcoming sets like the Ether Drift, which is, I would assume it's going to be a lot more vehicle based. Do you think, at least with what we've seen in the next year of sets coming forward, do you think that Wizards of the Coast is actually going to try and maintain that autopilot essence of, Standard for, the more rudimentary player who doesn't really get the intricacies of constructed play yet, or do you think that they would actually try and turn up the heat and the complexity?
So it's I have a hard time seeing how they're going to do that. That's my whole point. Um, it's just, and yeah, Foundation's just basically guaranteed that for 5 years we're going to have to deal with burn. You have enough just from Foundations alone. That was one of my complaints with Foundations. There's a lot of redundancy in Foundations, so they added like too many of
Well,
the same archetype or card into the mix that it's like, okay, well, we have a complete deck just from Foundations alone. You have this deck that's ready to go, and so I mean, dealing with Borostar and Bolt Wave, I mean, that's enough. You have 8 cards right there. You're gonna be fine with even just a couple of shock, and then Bolt Lightning, right? That's Foundations as well, right?
Burst Lightning,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, Burst Lightning, yeah.
Yeah, and
Burst Lightning's in there too. So
they'll probably always have shock and standard. And I mean, once Monastery Swift Spear rotates out, we'll still have Slick Shot and Hearthfire Hero and that kind of stuff.
well, that's what
But
I would like to see. Is I would like to like Foundations. I would have thought more of like the shocks, and like that would have been the staple card, not like Boros Charm.
it is
But
kind of a strange card to have in the core set. But as a person who likes to play Burn a lot, especially on Arena, and whenever I play ranked, I rarely ever go above gold because I couldn't give a less of a fuck to actually, try my hand at a competitive Magic. But I always seem to get stopped dead in my tracks by any form of life gain decks. And so, do you think Wizards of the Coast is going to try and increase that valve of life gain? Because that is another easy one-way avenue to get new players in the game, especially when you pair that with like Angels and
yeah,
a Johnny's Pride Mate and that kind of stuff.
and they added a bunch of those cards in. The problem with like life gain right now is it's just absolute trash versus control and versus the Demir decks. So I mean it only pairs up good versus burn. So yeah, you could get this good rock paper scissors pipe um meta that happens, but and arguably you could make the argument that burn should always be around because it keeps a lot of cheese in check.
Right.
And I'm actually liking it too because it's forcing these Demir decks. So Demir actually it became the deck, either that or Golgari. There's arguably because it was the only deck that could compete against prowess. So Burn now puts a wrench in it because Burn is just going to prey on decks that are specifically built against prowess.
Right.
Because you could care. I mean, that's the whole concept of Burn is you don't care if they kill your creatures. Who cares? It was a 1-for-1. Then they're going to have to stop direct damage now, and so you have to have specific cards in your deck to be able to beat both creatures and direct damage. So a cut down does nothing against a Boros Charm, and so now instead of running 14 removal spells, now Demir decks have to either get a little more aggressive or play some sort of counter magic or something. Otherwise, Burn's just going to prey on them. So it is interesting that fact that they've added more of a complexity
At least they didn't
to it.
outright put Lightning Bolt into standard.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
But I
then
mean, I would
at
argue.
least the 3 power, because right now it's just the 2 power test, or sorry, 2 toughness test. But if you had the 3 toughness test with Lightning Bolt, I feel like that would invert way in the favor of Burn excessively. Like, I mean, Lightning Bolt is already kind of a staple card in of its own, but compared to Bolt Wave, it feels like Lightning Bolt would be significantly more oppressive.
Yeah, but the thing is, you already have the 3 power or 3 toughness test though with cut down, and so
Yeah,
it's like it's a lot of cards are not as playable. Um, but I mean, Lightning Bolt is basically a Bolt Wave. Most of the time, you want it to go to the face.
right.
Like it feels bad if you're in a burn deck to have to use your Lightning Bolts to actually kill something.
Hmm.
So Lightning Bolt was actually a tool for other decks in Modern, like Jeskai Control, because it could go to the face, and those are the decks that wanted to use it as removal. But as far as Burn's concerned, I mean, Bolt Wave is just as strong as a Lightning. Well, not just as strong, but it does what they want it to do.
It's on
So
par. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I mean, so if I really had like any super negative thing to say outright about Foundations, at least right now with what I can acquiesce from all the cards that I've seen. Other than there just being so many damn cards that it's really hard to really get a grasp of what to expect for the next 5 years. But also, one of my biggest issues with Foundations isn't necessarily what it provides, but it's the what kind of gaps are left to fill over the years, because Foundations seems to, I mean, other than being part of its namesake where it is just all of the most necessary cards to help, maintain a somewhat even standard for the next 5 years, it makes me concerned that we're about to see a lot of power creep coming from these newer sets. And not just like your standard type of power creep where it's like, oh, we need to be a bit higher than Foundations. It's almost going to feel like we need 2025 Magic to be significantly more impactful than 2024 Magic. And then in 2026, we need everything, especially if it's going to be like tied in with Marvel kind of sets. Who knows what Spider-Man's going to have, especially since it came out that Marvel's Spider-Man wasn't supposed to be standard legal. It was going to be a modern legal set, much like Assassin's Creed was. But then they changed it about 6 months ago, and they said, hey, this has to be standard now. So that leads a lot of questions into being like, okay, well, is even Foundations really going to be all that relevant, except for like maybe 20, 25 cards from the set?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's my concern. That's basically what I'm saying, is that they have no choice but to power creep. So if they want these new cards to actually have any chance of seeing play, they have to. And one of the directions I'm not too impressed with either, and I'm sure they're going to do this like crazy in this Spider-Man set, because they've done it in all the other universes beyond, is what I like to call the word salad cards.
Yeah.
So they just put so many stinking abilities on one card where it's like, so Spider-Man's going to have reach, and he's also, well, let's give him some sort of flicker effect, but and let's make his power and toughness. Actually, we have this 3-drop needs to be a 3/5, because it's got to be stronger than all the other 3 drops, not just to it has all these abilities. I mean, Wizards used to balance cards based upon okay, if it's a 3 mana, it's going to be a 3/3 maximum. That's the baseline.
Yeah.
So if it gets an ability, we got to dumb it down to a 2/2. But now it's like, nah, we really want this card to see play. So like Shieldred, for example. Let's we got to make it a 4/5. And that one toughness was so relevant.
Yeah. It really is.
Because it dodged a lot of things when it was printed. Now it continues to dodge a lot of other cards that would kill it if it was just 4. And you just look at something like Shieldred, and if every ability, if you were just to individually look at it, they're good. It's decent. But when you word salad it all together with its Death Touch, it's 4 or 5 power and toughness for 4 mana. It's a 4/5 for 4.
Does everything.
Yeah, it's just Universe Balance be that they're gonna put Spider-Man's gonna be a whole paragraph long of text.
Who knows? We're probably gonna get like Dr. Octopus, but like reskinned as Shieldred, so that way Shieldred just stays in standard forever. That could just be a thing.
Yeah.
But like I think about like Kellen, for example, the new Kellen that's in this set. If I'm not mistaken, he's like he's a 1-mana 2/1 that kind of has like a Figure of Destiny style of effect where you can just kind of grow him later throughout the game. But it's cards like that where like if you had shown someone this card 10 years ago and they would have compared it at the time with like what's that called, Fire Drinker Satyr, I think is what I'm thinking of. Mm-hmm. And like even
the
10
downside
years
for a 2/1.
Yeah, exactly. And then like a decade prior you had like Jackal Pup. Well, nowadays you have cards like Kellen, or like you could even look at something like Watch Wolf, for example, which was a 2-mana 3/3. You play that today in standard, you'll get laughed out of the room.
Yeah. And a 2/1 for 1 used to have its place. Like Savannah Lions, that's what people were laughing about on this one. It's like Savannah Lions is already outclassed. So
it really
that used to be,
because there's a whole bunch of uncommon 2/1s. Like there's one in Brothers War that I think has like an activated ability that gets you like card advantage in the late game.
Yep.
Like where are we kind of going with this? Because, yeah, I remember
Yeah.
there was a period where there was an ebb and flow between balances. Like sometimes creatures would be a little bit better, and then maybe they'd get knocked down a little bit, and then you'd see artifacts, you know, having a bit more prevalence, or enchantments, like in the Theros block, for example. Like you had the whole constellation thing with like Eidolon of Blossoms and what was that card in Cons block, Mastery of the Unseen. Like you had that really neat enchantment kind of deck. Whereas nowadays it's just like every card might as well make you a ham sandwich. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
that's my main primary concern with Foundations is you look at a card like Kellen, and this is probably the most Kellen will ever get discussed about ever in its entire lifespan.
Yeah, it's seen fringe play in standard right now too, which is crazy because if you do look at that ability, that people would have lost their minds about. That's why I was looking at March Machines specifically. There were so many cards in that set. I'm like, whoa! Like these are a lot of them are this kind of the curse of mid range right now, where anything with 4 or 5 mana or above is so unplayable in an era of Atraxa, or especially with the Overlords they printed in Duskmourn. That the only reason that those are mid-range playable is you get to cheat them out earlier to get some sort of effect. So you got to like half pay for them early, and they're still good just to slam at their regular converted mana cost. And so that's what makes them playable. But there's so March of Machines specifically, those cards, those team up cards, most of them were super strong.
Oh yeah.
And like had some cool abilities, and none of them see play. Like I was looking at Thalia and the Gitrog monster again, like, jeez.
Yeah, dude, that card is so cool.
But
that's,
I mean,
that's that 4 mana one, right? It's like one in Abzan, and then it's got half of Thalia and half of Gitrog's effects just smushed together. Like,
yeah, there's and so many cards in that kind of era right there that seems so fun to brew with, and but then when you actually come to play, like, what's it going to do against Burn? What's it going to do against Doomblade? What's it going to do against actually those type of cards? I'm excited that if we can get this meta to really solidify itself. The issue is there's always Burn, and people are going to never give it up. And same with the prowess, because it feels so good to win on turn 2. Like this mentality of the players that play it, they just feel so like they were so good when they. It's a good deck to 5-0, and anyone can do it. Anyone can pick up a Gruul Prowess deck and 5-0 with it. And so I was getting excited when these Dimir decks were just preying on it, because that's the type of format that we need to start being able to play like anything goes type decks, because then you can start justifying these value creatures from the March of Machines era, because they actually pair really well up against like a 6/6 demon, or like if you're playing your own removal package, you can start slamming your own 4-drops and 5-drops. You know, they're just as strong as these, especially if you can synergize different combos and stuff with them. But unfortunately, it's as I mentioned with Bolt Wave and Boros Charm, those can be, I think, very, very tough to ever get a meta established that isn't shutting those decks down.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am, at least just thinking. Well, from hearing from what you've said, to be honest, you provide a lot more insight to this than I do. I'm a very casual player, but I mean, you have plenty of experience with these type of standard environments more than I do. But moving on to our final, or the meat of our episode. We're lagging a little bit behind, but I think we might be able to catch it up a little bit here. We're at about 53 minutes, but we can try and bang this out in the next 20 minutes or so. So, one of the things that I have noticed over the past few months is I've noticed this growing, not disdain, but people are starting to become more tired of Commander, especially those who come from 1v1 backgrounds. They yearn to go back to classic constructed. And I'm of the mind where, to me, 'cause obviously in Magic you have limited and you have constructed, and Commander falls under the definition of constructed, but for me Commander is kind of its own thing. Commander is like its own pillar, its own subset of Magic. And for me, constructed is 1v1 60 card best of 3, including sideboard type formats. And it seems that over the past few years, some Magic players, they didn't want to play Commander, so they moved on and they went to go play Flesh and Blood or Yu-Gi-Oh! Or some people moved over to Sorcery, but Sorcery is kind of more casual than it is competitive. But what I have noticed is that other than the growing disdain for Commander and Commander culture in general, I've noticed people wanting to go back to Constructed. So, as our resident Constructed observer, I won't say hater, but observer, it seems that you have opinions, particularly on other formats like Pioneer, for example, and Modern, and Standard being Modern 2.0. What do you think about the future of Commander versus Constructed? Do you really think that Commander is going to be the end-all be-all format of Magic, or do you think it's starting to run its course?
I mean, Commander's gonna always be around. You have your player. Like I always joke that those that can't play Commander. So I, my, I do turn my nose up. I'll be the first to admit to Commander players because, and I noticed that too. When we started the store, it was still on the height of 1v1 Constructed. Friday Magic was Standard, Pioneer, Modern. Everyone's dream was to make a Pro Tour. Everyone's a cutthroat player. Well, not not everyone, but casuals. Yeah, they were the kitchen player and casual players, but they weren't your people that came to events and to the store and whatnot. And then it almost feels like there was a Commander rebellion, is what it was, where they all banded together and said, "We're like, no, casual players unite. We're going to play this format." And they started to be the dominant voice, and they actually started getting the attention from Wizards of the Coast. And that was the big change. Is I think that the constructed formats will be fine as long as Wizards of the Coast establishes a clear way to play it. That was the problem with D20. When did it really start? 2020? 2020 through just recently is everything was so half-assed when it came to 1v1. So all of the Grand Prix got rebranded as what they call Magic Fest. And Magic Fest started to be more focused on the Commander aspect of it. Everything was so Commander oriented. When they designed new sets, all of the chase cards or all the Shazam in the set was a Commander card. And then they quit, like they pushed everyone that wanted to play 1v1 to Arena and started even doing the Arena tournaments for 1v1 and replaced those with, remember they had one of the Worlds, was it Worlds or Championship or whatever it was, but they had people actually show up and play on computers on Arena versus each other.
That was
that was the whole.
Was that the Mythic Invitational or whatever they called it? Something like
that?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what it was. Yep. That's what it was. When that was the big focus, and they forced Arena down everyone's throat. And I think that, so when people played MTGO back in the day, MTGO was a way to hone your skills so you'd be good at paper.
Right.
And it had its place. And that was the same thing with what people at first wanted Arena to do, was to like, okay, well, it's accessible. I can play test. Because there's just something about Magic and tabletop games that's the appeal, is to play them on a table against someone else. Yeah. And so when Wizards was like, nope, that's Commander. We're going to really double down on Commander as the tabletop experience, and we're going to make this digital for 1v1. I mean, it left a horrible taste in everyone's mouth there. And then the main reason, though, is they half-assed everything when it came to tournaments, when it came to even advertising things like store championships or regionals, and they got rid of PTQs, and they got like all these things that I want to say Wizards did, but it was more like they didn't do for that time period. And now we've seen a massive resurgence in 1v1 because it seems like Wizards gives a crap again. Yeah. And so they're actually starting to we had very good viewership on this last Worlds. Mm-hmm. And I'm expecting, I still remember the days, and the thing that excites me the most is I always say the market always shows you exactly where, what's happening. And there was a time period where a deck would win a Pro Tour and nothing would even spike up in the 1v1s. And you could tell that was bad. That was
the usual
bad time period for
That was the usual time because a set would come out in standard. Some people would spec a little bit on, some of the more obvious cards. And then after the tournament, there'd always be a few surprise cards that would always shoot up like $5, $10, $20. That's how it
And
used
everyone
to
would be
be
watching too to see what spices the pro team's going to run this time, and
Yep.
that seemed to be gone for like a couple of years, where there just was no one cared. I think that a lot of people did get seduced into Commander, and I think what we're seeing right now is a lot of like 1v1 players that are just kind of done. They're just like, well, I gave it a try. It's not Magic. It's not for me. And so it's a lot of things that I think we're hitting the perfect storm of everyone coming back to being like, the nostalgia's hitting in. It's like, this is what Magic was originally. This is what we liked it for. And you're right, there's a big difference between limited players and constructed players. We had an entire group of people that refused to play limited for a long time. I kind of I joked about constructed players, that constructed players are just people that can't play limited. So you have your tiers of people that can't play. You have people that, because
the
constructed
highest
has been plagued by autopilot for a long time. So
the highest, most intellectual Magic players are limited in cube aficionados.
yeah. I mean, and I show my bias too because I was a limited player. I've told my story before. The only reason that I switched over was there was no path to any sort of tournaments or any sort of anything. Like they forced 1v1 down our throats during, it was like Return to Ravnica, Innistrad Return to Ravnica. It was like, okay, everyone's gonna be playing standard now, and because it used to be Friday Night Magic was mostly drafts. At any store you ever went to, people wanted to draft, and then Wizards changed their whole course of, we want standard to be the flagship. And so then all these stores started doing standard, and then it took off. And I was a sad Kevin because then drafts never fired like they used to. And yep.
Honestly, you're 100% correct on that, because the area that I live in, there is a surplus of local game stores. Like I could literally sneeze and the spittle would land on a game store near me. And the most common thing that I've noticed is that there's no limited. And there hasn't been a limited scene in, the better part of a decade. Return to Ravnica, Theros, Khans of Tarkir. It's just dwindled significantly over the years. And now it's just kind of an after effect. When you think of limited, you don't think of paper anymore, at least from what I've seen people talk about on the internet. You think of MTGO and maybe Arena. Like those seem to be the most popular avenues to try and enjoy limited these days. And that brings its own questions of set EV and surplus and availability of cards for players and stores and stuff like that. But it makes me wonder if constructed is gaining more popularity and it continues to gain that momentum. Do you think limited is prime for a renaissance? Or do you think maybe limited is just kind of a thing of the past at this point?
They brought it back to the Pro Tours and Worlds, so
right. And I mean,
that's a good step.
They do have stuff like Jumpstart, which is half limited, half constructed, which for someone like me, I'm not really into limited, but Jumpstart is kind of more like that handholdy, random assortment of cards, combine them together and just play. And so it makes me wonder if Wizards of the Coast is going to try and make limited a more integral aspect to the game, because from the beginning, maybe it's a bit bold of me to say, but I think a big aspect of why Magic has been able to grow and succeed from 1998 to 2012 was because of limited. Because limited provided you a $15, $20 way to play Magic that didn't ask you to spend $500 on a meta deck.
Yeah, and I think that the whole kind of the reprint hell we went under when all the people cried about their game pieces being so expensive kind of led to the whole death of limited. Collector boosters, pushing everyone to one of the things that I think killed drafts at our store and even pre-releases was when they allowed collector boosters and commander decks to be sold on the pre-release. And so it used to be people were forced to play in your midnight pre-release. If you wanted those cards early, and I remember standard players that they'd do it too, and they'd play in a ton of them because they because then you'd have a standard tournament right after that, and so people would join these pre-releases and drafts just to try to get the cards they needed. And it was fun. I miss that. I get nostalgia times of where people were just playing. Where people were playing anything. That was the cool thing, is no matter what was going on, people were into it. And I think the buck still stops on Wizards. I think people will, the whole adage, if you build it, they will come type thing. And so the focus went to Commander mainly because that's where Wizards was directing everyone to play.
Yeah.
And it was a big cash cow for them at first, but I mean, that's something they can't, like, they've squeezed that. There's very little they can do with Commander now. They've power crept it like crazy. They've FOMO'd it. They've, Commander Masters. They released like 4 new Commander decks with every set. And so now we're starting to see the I think the fatigue of Commander. I've been noticing that a lot of the new cards don't spike up cards as much as they used to. Mainly just there's so many Commanders, so that always has the effect. But
it really does. Now, Sorry, I'm trying to gather my thoughts here for a second. So let's entertain the thought that, let's say, by the time the next standard set rolls around, standard is going to become the marquee format of Magic again, right? So let's say that constructed fully returns. Do you think that the Commander players that started Magic through Commander will come into the game through constructed, or do you think that they would stay in Commander? Because I'm of the mind where if you learn how to play Magic through Commander, that is probably the worst way to learn how to play the game, because the Magic experience or the Commander and the usual Magic experience are kind of anathema to each other, whereas Commander is more of a social kind of board game-esque type of experience where you worry more about the experiences of the other 3 people with you, whereas constructed Magic, it's literally just play the best that you can, screw the other opponent's feelings. If they get flooded out, cool, you die, And so, and one of the other things that I've been thinking about with Commander lately is that because it is a bit more casual and accessible, that it is an avenue for people like younger people, and particularly women coming into the game. Do you think that they would actually find something like constructed, just not women and children in general, but just newer players? Do you think that there is enough merit to constructed to attract people from Commander into the format? Or do you think constructed needs something else?
Yeah, that's why I don't like how the power level of standard is so insanely high, because it doesn't allow people any breathing room to kind of explore and learn, because you're just kind of thrust right into the fire of it is funny you mentioned that. I would say about 90% of people now, I'd even speculate even higher, are introduced to Magic through Commander. And that's because a lot. Well, you look at all the celebrities though that are playing Magic now. It's all Commander. You got the Post Malones. You got, even now if you look at the biggest YouTubers, they're all Commander focused. Like, how many times do you ever hear like Clarion Community College even talk about Modern anymore? I mean, they do their Commander thing, and so there isn't a really good. That's the issue right now with constructed. There's not a good path. I mean, that's what it used to bleed into. It used to be play in your pre-release, learn how to play in pre-release. That's 1 versus 1. Get some drafts in your. And the whole thing with that too is you start to accumulate cards. So it's like, oh, play pre-release, great way to get introduced to Magic. Oh, now do a draft. Now, oh, what do you have here? You got these cool, and people used to see this too. Oh, you pulled a Healer's Hawk and a Johnny's Pride Mate. Oh, you can start building a life gain deck out of this. Right. So now you just need to pick up these cards, and then you can enter into your standard. But the problem is when you go, that is why I keep stressing they need to have a lower power level standard so that people could actually take a pre-release deck and have any sort of like. There's a difference between going 0-5 and being close in some games or feeling like you played, and going 0-5 and just getting absolutely crushed by something like Prowess or Dimir. I mean, Dimir midrange, you're never, if you play your little Hero Hawk or Johnny Primate, you're never going to resolve anything.
No.
So you're not going to play. And then if you go against Burn, they're just going to run you over. And it goes against Atraxa, you're going to like, wait, what'd you just do on? All of a sudden you have 7 mana and an entire board full of things and a clutch full of 7 cards in your hand. You're drawing a card every time you cast them. Yeah, it's just like standard is way too unapproachable right now for a new player. And I don't know how they solve that.
With the culture of Commander being directly tied to pre-constructed decks, us constructed players are used to what we used to have with these challenger decks, and then before that we had invent decks. Do you think that that model is still going to be relevant, or do you think that's something that they should push for, or do you think that maybe they should change that and maybe make it more so, like for example, like Pokemon, what they kind of do like once a year is that they'll put like 1 or 2 meta decks and they'll print like 60-75% of it into an affordable like $30 package. Like for example, I bought that Charizard EX deck because it was like, okay, I could buy the cards for an affordable price, or I could just buy it all in one grouping all together, just like how it used to be, and like with Commander constructed decks. Now, a lot of this could kind of blend into maintaining the value of standard cards in particular and making sure you're not printing the most valuable cards into the dirt. But it feels like in terms of getting Commander players back into standard, it almost feels like you kind of have to give them the decks almost outright. Like you were saying earlier, for example, like the burn deck. Imagine just having a new challenger deck that has 4 Bolt Waves, 4 Boros Charms, 4 Boros Lightning, 4 Monastery Swift Spears, you know, that kind of stuff. Do you think that would be enough to actually convince players to come back and play?
The problem is like challenger decks and event decks failed the last. Because the problem with Wizards between Pokemon is Pokemon still, the value of Pokemon is in the chase lottery cards, so they don't have to worry about creating that Charizard deck because they know that they don't destroy the whole reason to open up packs.
Right.
So if Wizards of the Coast can somehow transition, and Foundations was a good example of this though, where the value is in the fractured foils and the mana symbol foils.
Right.
And so they could easily do that. They could throw the Boros Charms and things like Monastery Swift Spears are been destroyed in value so much that it's they could put it in a prepackaged deck. But it seems like the constructed players are way more sensitive than Commander players are to the value that's actually in the decks, and that's what's been the big undoing of Challenger decks. Is Challenger decks, they'll print like $100 worth of cards in a Challenger decks and then release it for $40, and then people will cry bloody murder a week later because there's only $30 worth of cards and they're expected to play $40 worth of $40 for that, because that's what happens in the secondary market. Because first of all, the Magic community is way more established to breaking down things and selling it on the secondary market than something like Pokemon, which is still very lottery driven, where a lot of the cards that enter into the secondary market are people that are mass box opening to find particular cards. It's already, as we say at the very first of this video, you're losing. There's no expected value in Pokemon. You're losing money every time you do it. Where in Magic, that's not the case. Magic has been very good at being near expected value on most packs. And that's the reason to buy the packs, is that you can pretty much, even though you're not getting the cards you want, you're getting cards that have equivalent value to that booster pack that then you could then trade or, eventually use them somewhere in your collection. That goes back to the arena. We don't let you dust your cards because maybe you'll want to use them someday.
So fucking stupid.
Stupidest thing ever.
Like anyway, they really want to grow arena, but they are making damn sure that there is no value for the cards associated with arena in the first place to even open the damn program.
Dusting would be really good because people will dust stuff and then they'll need them and have to buy them. They're so dumb with it. But yeah, but compare Challenger and event decks to pre-constructed decks, and pre-constructed Commander decks just blows my mind. That I was looking at Zendikar right now. I think Zendikar Rising, which is old by standards now of a pre-con commander, and the Commander decks actually sell pretty good for their sealed their sealed box. They sell. Like people will buy them. And there's not a card that's worth over $4.
No,
so you lose money. You buy that, you lose money. You could literally buy every card in the. I mean, the problem is 15-cent cards that aren't worth 15 cents are worth 15 cents just because people have realized listing. Like if you go below 15 cents, then yeah, and that's how it is at our store too. Like we have a 15-cent minimum. I want to raise it to a quarter because it literally takes me time to go and pull out of a card from
Yeah.
a box, and that's my time you're paying for. The card is worthless. You're paying for my time to go find that card for you. But anyway, so the Commander players, they don't seem to care. They like the convenience of that prepackaged deck to build off of more than the value of what they're getting. But constructed players, they have a lot. I mean, put a lot more weight on the value that they're getting, and then they get so butthurt if that value goes down. And they say they don't, but then they do. And then things like Challenger event decks then rot. I still have loads of Challenger decks back here. If yeah, you can see, yeah, right there,
Those
right there.
were they
That's Challenger decks.
were they the Pioneer ones or?
Yeah, there's some Pioneer and Standard ones there.
Mm.
So, and maybe they could do it now. Like Foundations, I'm actually surprised they didn't do Challenger decks Foundations because it's a 5-year product. What my biggest complaint against Challenger decks, it was the Coast did, is they didn't want it to hurt their current equity. So when they come out with Challenger decks, usually come out in like a February, they wouldn't take cards that were released in like that January or even that November set. So that the fall and the winter set that was not rotating, they wouldn't even include any of those cards in the Challenger decks. Maybe because they didn't know of what cards would see play in metas, and they didn't want to take that gamble. They wanted to work with what was known at the time. But it was just such a slap in the face that a lot of these Challenger decks were only good for 6 months before they rotated. And so it's like, what was the point? The shelf life of them was like, in my opinion, 6 months is a lifetime. But in a lot of people's minds, they're like, no, if I don't get this long-term 2-year value out of this purchase, then it's not worth it. And I mean, that was the whole point of Pioneer, was to kind of let your standard cards have some sort of point after rotation.
Yeah.
But now they power crept that like crazy that there's fewer and fewer cards that are going to actually be, Pioneer playable.
Here's an idea that I just had, just what you were just talking about now with like, sure, you can print a Challenger deck, but it could be irrelevant in 4 months or whatever, right? Let me shoot you an idea here, and this is my capitalist mind kind of working. Let's say you're Wizards of the Coast, and you say, all right, we have 3 tier 1 standard decks, and we could sell them as a secret lair, right? You could sell the whole 75, maybe have a different alternate art promo as like a reason for collectors to buy it, but say sell it for $100, sell it for $150 direct to consumer. Do you think something like that would actually sell? Because, and let's say, and the reason why I bring up secret layers is because it's more on demand and the product tends to get to the consumer faster, and Wizards of the Coast can be more aware of what's going on, and they don't have to commission a whole bunch of new art to be made and everything. They just effectively just reprint the select amount of cards. Do you think that something like a secret layer deck, kind of like how they had with the Commander decks, do you think that could be a viable option to try and get players to play? Or...
The way I would actually do it is I would actually utilize the vast networks of local game stores and do them with events. So how I would do that is an event only using these Challenger decks that come out, and that's the only way you get them is to you come and play in this event. And it's just a whole learn to play experience. Have the people that, I mean, the problem is that Wizards of the Coast would have to police it with, actually going to stores that are running events that are, and there's a lot of other games right now that are like One Piece just did one that was very successful, where they released a ton of starter decks. There's what they call ST Star, which stands for starter. They did 5 of them. And they released it with an event. So now then they'll be available later on. But how it was with One Piece is they released them specifically for stores that were participating in this starter release. And then people could come in, they could choose their starter deck. No, they're all balanced. Every one of these starter decks were meant to play. There was one that ended up being a little bit better than the rest of them, but and one that had value also that then got eaten up. But regardless of that, though, these decks were balanced to play against other. And Arena's actually done some of these events before specifically on Arena, where you got to choose like a specific deck and then, play against other people playing
It's like a
similar
pre-con
powered
league,
decks.
pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And so that's how I would do it. And then I'd give a cool promo for everyone that participated in it. So it gives some incentive for people that may already even have the cards. So make it event oriented.
Right.
To where that's what I want them to do. I want them to go back to utilizing their local game stores. They make these people have tables. Like that's the whole point too. Like that's just like ticking me off today with all these Pokemon people that are bragging about getting distribution. And I'm like, cool. You're gonna accelerate the death of your own hobby. Well, again, not like most of these players don't give a crap about the game. That's why I've never understood Pokemon. That it was that the game is what's making it collectible, but now the fact that it's collectible is making it collectible, and so no one cares about the game anymore. But anyway, I'm getting into a whole can of worms with that.
It's its own
Pokemon.
It's its own monster when you consider the entire franchise. It's just you got shows, you got video games, you got cards, you got toys.
It's crazy though because there's someone in that company that really really loves the game. Because they do a good job, like
I can see it, like when I open up the box of Surging Sparks and I'm like actually reading the cards and I'm like trying to understand the game and playing Pokemon TCG live on my phone. I'm just like, okay, there's actual depth in here. Sure, the game is a bit rudimentary in its sorcery speed, but one thing that I've noticed with Pokemon and compared to Magic is that Magic is more of a game of card advantage, whereas Pokemon is more of a game of strictly resource management, because you have ancestral recalls in that game which are utter dog shit. Instead, everyone is playing Wheel of Fortunes and everyone's playing like 2 to 3 tutors per turn, and so like there's an actual depth to that game there. And when I look at it and I think to myself, I'm like, I don't want Magic to be like that, but I look at it and I look at the Pokemon card gaming culture from what I've seen, and I just find it very interesting that a company like Wizards of the Coast kind of acquiesced that, or not acquiesced, but forsaken that for something more casual like Commander, where it feels like we've had 30 years of game growth based off of this fantastic 1v1 game system here. Sure, it has some faults, but without it, no other card game would exist in the first place. And sure, they were the first, but I still kind of think they're the best at it. And one of the things that the final subject that I wanted to talk about in regards to this Commander versus Constructed situation is I want to have a bit of a thought exercise here. Let's say you, Kevin, are on the board of directors for Wizards of the Coast, and you're one of the people calling the shots for what's going to happen. And you've been given the responsibility of making Constructed more viable and more popular. How would you go about that? Like, what are one or two things, most importantly, that you would try and focus on to actually grow Constructed back to where it used to be?
Well, first of all, I'd make Arena more engaging. I mean, the first Arena's such a drag. So, like, they've pushed everyone into ultra competitiveness in Arena because the only thing is the rank system. So there's so many. They could easily make a solo mode, like a player versus like a little RPG type thing where you can actually play against bots and
like a little campaign kind of thing.
Exactly. And then have dailies that are more engaging and other and they need to be very focused and give people some reason to actually do them. So, and then have that bleed into Paper Magic. They need to make the transition from Arena back and forth. So, packs should have codes like Pokemon for Arena. They just need to give up on their lust that they're going to make billions off of both.
Give actual utility to the packs. I don't get it.
Yes. Well, now there's a thing called like Arena. They came out with a thing called Arena Direct, which is now you can win Paper Magic through playing on Arena, which is cool because then it's going to like incentivize people from Paper to play Arena, and also people that exclusively might be playing Arena, it might give them some sort of reason to play in Paper, which is good. Like that's a good step in the right direction. So yeah, they need to both their digital programs. They need to update them to standards of 2024, not 1999. That's what I still
Yeah.
feel like those programs are like. And second of all, like I think that they need to bring back the local play. When I played back in 2014, every store had a boogeyman, had a bully, had a a person you wanted to beat. Like it was
Yep.
so, and then you had take that even a expand that bubble regional. Like we would go to states and you'd see the same player. Like we had like some pretty good competition between stores. We're like, oh, those game grade people.
The
I
turfs.
just can't wait to
Yeah.
beat them. Can't wait to beat them. Let's beat them. And there was just like this huge, this like we're all turned into little gangs, but it was fun. It was this kind of store pride type thing. And I think Wizards, if they need to figure out how to do that. And I don't have the answers right now to how to capture that magic again of getting people to play at their local game store. I think that a little bit of their undoing was to uh, also promote this premium nonsense, because premium is out of the range of a lot of not just areas they could actually support a premium store, but a lot of personalities of people that don't want a premium store.
Yeah.
I've talked to so many people like I don't want to be a the standards they want for a premium store are kind of very corporate of how things are structured to where it's people like their dives. They like their like let the free market dictate exactly how a game store should operate or should there should be a huge spread between little tiny stores and these big stores. I was like I kind of my whole trip to Moldova was so uh, it made me lust for that kind of thing here in United States, and I know a lot of it's born out of just necessity of the different demographics that can actually afford different things. But when I was in Moldova, there were shops that were basically the size of a closet of
Mm-hmm.
like toiletries. So there'd be one like every few corners would be this
Right.
ultra tiny shop. And then you'd have a shop that was like a little bit bigger that was a couple rooms. And then you had all the way, and this was within a mile radius. And then there was a thing called a Kaufman, which is the size of a Walmart, and everything in between from this little tiny thing. And I think that's the same thing with and why they exist is that a place like Moldova is such the wild, wild west with kind of free markets right now, because it's just a country that's coming out of poverty and into uh, a lot more accessibility, and growth is happening like crazy. And so you see a spread of all the demand of what different people. It's funny because it's like I had no interest in shopping at these little tiny stores. I don't know why they would exist, and but there was a little bit of charm to these like mid-sized ones that
Mm.
existed like around the corner. And so I wish that like Magic would just kind of embrace that let the communities kind of drive what they want. And so they did. There's a point in Magic, again, the 2022 era, when they had this vision of what they wanted Magic and how they wanted it to be played, and they wanted this ultra clean cut commander experience where everyone was so, oh man, and it's I have nothing against the command zone and uh, those guys that have that sort of ultra social games, and oh, look at these cool things we can do and these fun experiences,
Very
and
sanitized, high
yes,
production.
yes, yes, yeah, yeah. But I mean, even the yeah, like that's what they want to do with these stores too, and this play. And yeah, I think I got off track with the question, but
Well,
I think all Wizards needs to do though is they just need to incentivize stores, uh, kind of running with it in however they want to do it too. Let's just, instead of being well, first of all, they had this ultra specific. You had to do this, this, and this, and this, and then they threw that completely out, and they started saying, "Oh, if you want to run two-headed dragon giant with a commander, for F&M, then go for it. We don't care
yeah,
what you do."
do
And that
whatever.
wasn't good
Yeah,
either.
yeah,
So I'd like to see Wizards themselves actually set the parameters and be like, okay, we're going to focus on this. And they're doing it better with the RCQ season, being focused on a specific format and really incentivized it. And they've started to do promos and playmats again for game days, and incentivizing stores to do game days. And that's the direction they need to go. And all in all, they really need to invest more money into tournaments at all level, from the LGS all the way to Worlds and everything in between, to get just people a reason to play.
Right.
And like I said, if you build it, they will come.
Yeah, exactly.
And quit relying on Commander. Like, it's good. Do both. Why can't they do both? Why can't they focus on 1v1 and really go crazy on that? And they can focus on Commander. They can still have their Commander fests. They can still have their, like, Magic is big enough now, and they can pat themselves on their back for that. Commander took off. That's awesome. It added this entire new market that they weren't capitalizing on. They were able to. What happened with that demographic is oftentimes they would get either super isolated and have to have their little kitchen table group, or they would just get crushed in the 1v1 and they wouldn't have a place and then quit. And now they have a place at the LGS level and even at convention level to play Commander. Like, Commander has this entire thing, but at the same time, you can't just then shift your entire focus and be like, okay, this is going to be self-sufficient. We're just going to be, I mean, they're missing out on an entire potential of what worked for 25 years. And so do both and hire different people to run different aspects of it. Like Gavin Verhey always confuses me. That guy is just so stretched thin on all the projects that the guy he's supposed to be overseeing, because he was the Pauper guy. Like, that guy was hired to oversee Pauper.
And now it's like now it seems at least Gavin is effectively, and I'm not saying this like in a disparaging way or anything, but it seems like he's being groomed to be like the next Mark Rosewater when Morrow eventually, retires. It feels like Gavin's just going to slide right into his shoes, be the face of Magic, and be the guy that everyone talks to. And with that, and here's what I think Wizards could really do to get back to the glory days, is they really need to revamp their marketing back to what it used to be, because I've been on a nostalgic kick lately, and I've been watching a lot of old Magic ads from like 2010, 2000, kind of that turn of the century era, where there was a lot more edge. It was a bit more, like, how would you say? Edgy, I guess, is probably one of the better kind of descriptors, where it's like trying to market towards like particularly young teenage men. And not saying that we need to get more young teenage men in, but we need to get younger people in. And what I was thinking about with Commander is that Commander is great for casual players who are of a certain age. Once you hit like 25, 30 years old, you're kind of pulling back a little bit. You got more stuff that you need to focus on, like your home and your family and that kind of thing. And so you're not really too keen on trying to keep up with the metas and everything. So you just want to buy your Commander deck, not worry about it, and then play casually. And you're not really concerned about winning. You're just concerned about having fun. Now, Wizards of the Coast, I feel like if I was in charge, or at least a decision maker, I would want to revamp our marketing strategy towards younger people and push Constructed to them, because young people by nature are much more competitive, and they are way more willing to spend that kind of money to not only buy the decks, but to also fly across the country. And like you were saying earlier, younger people are more likely to build their own factions within their own stores and have these little rivalries between other subsections. And one of the biggest issues that Magic's had for the last 5-10 years is that it's become very apparent that its audience is starting to age out. You're not really seeing that many younger people. It's mostly, late
Look at
teens,
Worlds.
and then like people in their 30s and 40s.
Yeah, where's all the up and comers? With the Worlds is just a bunch of the retirement home.
It's
the same people.
It's the send off of all the fogies.
They need to make competition sexy again. That's basically in a nutshell, and embrace it, because there is when you look at things like League of Legends and Dota and MOBAs are ultra competitive. And they don't focus on the casual player. They focus on the competitive and let the casuals will just fall in line.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't really have to market to I always make the comparison that it'd be like the NBA trying to focus on pickup ball. You know, and or basketball. To sell basketballs, to be like no, I can't even think of the basketball company of showcasing their product at the pickup game rather than at the NBA.
Right. And people, they want to see that competition. It was kind of like what we were talking about earlier with like particularly in the competitive, professional, high level, high production kind of aspect. You don't really see a Jackson Cunningham coming in and like, who's this kid? And then he just comes and fucking stomps everyone. That's just not a thing anymore. I mean, like, you're going to have like your LSVs and your Kai Buddhas for as long as he's going to be around for. But at a certain point, it's just like, if you don't start aggressively marketing towards kids again, those kids, I mean, like, let's be honest here, these kids these days, the concept of a card game in general is very foreign to them, much more than it was for us, because we were in a different era of the world where everything wasn't so digital. Whereas I feel like there is an opportunity that is yet to be exploited, because I can see in these newer generations, they yearn for something more tangible. They want to go back into the real world. And Magic has the opportunity of a lifetime to sell the real world back to them and to bring them into an area where they can talk to people, in a store and find a new network of friends and everything. And like you said, it all starts with the local game store.
There's a lot of good data for this too. So like numbers for outdoor activities are up, and gym memberships, things like that, for the younger Zoomers now. So it does seem like people do want to unplug and find meaningful connections, and so they're bored. They're bored of always being plugged in, and that's where I said this from the very beginning of creating my channel, that's what made Magic was the tabletop experience. That if I was going to play a game online, I'm going to play Dota. I'm going to play something else that has a lot. Like, the problem with card games in general is they're restrictive in what they can do, because you only have a little card that can have so much text on it. Whereas a game like a MOBA or a MMORPG or all these other things, the sky's the limit of what you can do with them.
Yeah.
And so they're going to be better suited for the digital. And so where card games shine is in a place where you are constrained to what can fit on a cardboard and the rules around them, and not having a computer have to calculate all your things for you. So yeah, it's the Magic doesn't need to, like, the game is perfect. It doesn't need to really make any massive adjustments, except for trying to keep people's attention. Going back to the thought with you're saying with the you remember the War of the Spark trailer?
It was fucking awful.
The War of the Spark? Just the one that had the Linkin Park.
Yes, I have a video on my channel where I like.
You hated the one?
I was very sardonic and ironic in my, because I did one of those reaction type videos, and it was just irony soaked. And this was also a period of time where the trailer music for any kind of trailer was always just a very dramatic, epic version of a song that everyone knew.
See, I actually liked it, and it went viral too. That's all. The whole thing is it worked.
Yeah.
And it's there was a sense of like people wanting to play in this, like the storyline worked and everything. It just all came together. And then I remember like right after it, they're back to these like super lame. Like, have you seen the Foundations trailer?
No. Wait, no. Is that the one where it's like the real actual people, and it's like the dad is showing meet your wife playing Magic? You don't want to meet your wife playing Magic. Trust me, you don't.
Like that's how they, like, people are like they did a Hallmark commercial for playing a card game. Like that's how out of touch Wizards of the Coast was. That it's like
you want the edgy commercial. You want the two kids standing on the opposite side of a street And like one pulls up a card and then like a huge Shivan dragon pops up behind him. And then the other one pops up a card and a Sarah Angel or whatever pops up behind him. And then they like clash and then boom, end of commercial. Like that's kind of all
like
you need.
Doing like a chess video of like a love story.
Too lovey-dovey, man. It's pandering to our generation. That's the issue with that thing, is that it's pandering to us because we're in the shoes of the characters that are being showcased in that video. And it's like, we were going to buy the cards anyways. Well,
I know. Were they trying to like make it nostalgic? Like, oh, this person that forgot about Magic and has a shoebox somewhere is going to get back in. Like, that's a losing battle. Like, you shouldn't be trying to get those people back into the game. What's going to get them back into the game is if it has excitement.
Yeah.
And I mean, you'll get some people with that now nostalgic whole bit, but I mean, they won't last. That's the whole thing. Like, oh, I remember playing this game, and they'll go get their shoebox and buy a few packs, and then be like, okay, this was fun. And I do that with a lot of games that, they come out with like a remake of an old game, and I'll dabble in it and like, oh, that was good fun trip down memory road. Okay, now on to something else.
Done with it. Yep, exactly. Yep. Nothing new.
Again, that's perfect. The foundations that we're talking about, like, who in the hell was their target audience there?
The audience was for content. Where the audience was content creators who were like, I cry every time when I watch it.
I know. That's those whole stories always like, and I've kind of fallen victim to kind of doing this whole thing. I've talked about, oh, Magic saved my life and blah blah blah. You know, because I talked about how Magic gave me an instant social life. The game store like basically was a godsend, but the game still had to be a good game. That's what they should focus on, and then these stories can make themselves with stuff. But
exactly, the stories are within the gathering itself. It's like,
I'd like to see a trailer of the suspense of the Last Worlds of top decking a card. Like, how many times is that video of the guy top decking the Lightning Helix when it was the one outer in his deck, and it's but the suspense of when Randy Buehler was like. And he was going through the play of what could happen. Okay, what he does here is he slams this, and then if he top decks this, then it happens, and it's like, everyone just loses their mind. The crowd loses their mind, and that's the whole thing. Like, that's what people like to see with sports highlights, is the Hail Mary, where it's like, oh, they're
drama.
They're down by 6, they got one play left, and this is the only, they got to go for it, and this is that type of stuff would be a lot better. A way of,
I think one of my favorite,
again, make it sexy.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite Magic Pro stories comes from, I think it was a decade ago, but Magic, they used to fund like these little mini documentaries, and they had like an actual movie that I think you can still watch on Netflix, where it showcased the journey to the World Championships through the perspectives of different pro players. And one of the highlights was Patrick Chapin, because it was like, the last time he was going to be world champion, it flubbed at the end, and this was Enter the Battle.
Magic?
It was like Enter the Battlefield.
Yeah, they Enter the Battlefield. There we go. Enter the Battlefield. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a name. That guy, he like retired and went on to something else, but then they didn't. Why in the world didn't they replace him?
I don't know. They had the golden ticket to continue selling the narrative of the pro player.
I mean,
but it was very exciting to watch. Like Patrick in particular is just like, is he going to do it? Is this going to be the year where he finally gets his championship ring? Like
8 years ago.
Things.
Jeez,
we're getting old.
Oh, I'm looking at this top comment by Ristic Studies. Was the top comment pinned? This film makes me want to succeed.
Yes, that's what you need.
Boom. And that was 8 years ago, and then now we have Foundation trailers about meeting your wife.
Yes, meet a fellow mentally ill person and then develop a relationship with them. See how that works out for you.
Well, don't get me started on. I mean, that's been my pet peeve of anything is. All these people have been lusting about how they're gonna, we want girls in Magic so bad, so you can date them. I just go meet someone a normal way.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, talk about like Magic wanted to get rid of that whole creepy thing. Like there's nothing worse than people trying to pick up a girlfriend at a Magic store.
And then everyone is like trying to white knight off. It's like that South Park episode where all the boys, all of a sudden the puberty kicks on and they all become like apes and they all start fighting each other. It's kind of like the same thing. But I feel like we have covered our subjects very fairly here. We're running at an hour 44. That's good. We're an hour shorter than the other episodes, so I think we're making good time here. However, we've reached the final part of our episode. Kevin, do you have anything that you would like to plug?
Nope. Just the usual suspects. You can come over to my Goner Game channel and hear me rant about Pokemon or Magic. I've been ranting about a bunch of stuff, but if you like the business talk, find me there. Eventually, I can. I say this like a broken record. One of these years, I'll revive the Rogue Deck Builder. Kind of sad to let it die, but there's time and place for everything.
There is. And then for me, I'll just give you all at home a little taste. If you want to go on reddit.com and go to r/frontlinetcg, that is a card game that I am working on. I will talk about it more in an independent video on this channel. And we'll talk more about game design and all that kind of fun stuff. But for the meantime, go check it out, see if you like it. But as far as that is concerned, I think that is the end of this episode. Thank you all for watching, and thank you all who have made it to this point. And if you did, put banana as a comment in the video to let me know that you got this far. Anyways, thank you all for watching. This has been the Mana Dorks, and we'll catch you on the flip side.